We have one final keynote. I'm really looking forward to it. It's called Human Values and Integrity in Social Media Recommendations by Alon Halevy, Director of Facebook AI. It's about a vital part of our society, our digital society, social networks of information and communication such as Facebook. How do we know what information to trust, and how can users be protected from hate, misinformation, and exploitation? Alon Halevy is the director at Facebook AI, and he'll describe recent progress in the use of AI to tackle these problems. And he will also share some observations from a study on human values that included experts from the fields of AI, human-computer interaction, psychology, policy, law, and journalism. He's been a director at Meta AI, and most recently the Reality Labs research since 2019, where he works on human value alignment, the combination of neural and symbolic techniques for data management and responsible personal information management. Doesn't that sound exciting? And he's here live. Please help me in welcoming Alon Halevy. Wonderful to have you.
Thank you for having me.
Welcome to Sweden, where a recent study shows that Facebook is the most common place for Swedes to express political opinions.
I'm happy to hear that.
But I will not ask you about that, but rather I was curious when I did research on you. You have co-authored one book called The Infinite Emotions of Coffee. And what are some of the ideas that you discuss there?
About 10 years ago, I realized that what I like to do is go around the world and go to cafes. And I realized that in every country I go to, I get a different experience. So I wanted to study it in more detail, and the obvious solution was to write a book on the topic. And so I now had an official excuse to travel around the world and drink coffee.
Oh, so this is not about responsible personal information management.
This is about increasing my frequent flyer account. This is a hobby on the side. Call it a midlife crisis if you want.
Wonderful. How many of you are coffee nerds in here? Okay, I think there's some people you can hang out with afterwards. I'll leave the stage to you.
Thank you very much. Good afternoon. Thank you for having me here. It's great to be in Stockholm. I love coming to Stockholm, even in the winter. I'm going to take you through a journey today. So, as you know, social networks, Facebook being one of them, are in the news a lot for whether the kinds of information that you see on networks and how companies like Facebook, like Twitter, like YouTube deal with these issues. So this is a topic that involves not only AI, but it involves issues of policy, of law, of psychology, what have you. So my journey is going to have three parts. This is partially a personal journey, but it's also how the community has been moving through these problems. The first part of the journey is what others call integrity, which is how do we keep bad stuff off of social networks in general. So this is a problem that social networks had to deal with pretty much from the beginning. And now have pretty significant systems in place that use AI, artificial intelligence, in extremely innovative ways to do that. But as we develop the solutions, and we're never done with these things, as we develop the solutions for integrity, this led to much harder problems of, hold it, are we really doing the right things? Do we have in place the kind of processes that you need to make these really hard decisions? And so this leads to a much broader and harder topic, which is human values. Okay, so human values is something that ethicists have been dealing with for millennia. So if you thought AI was hard, try doing the ethics for a week. Okay, then you'll see that AI is actually a piece of cake. So when you start thinking about human values and what are the human values that these systems are supporting, you get to some very, very interesting questions. So that's going to be the second part of the journey today. And the third part of the journey is sort of an outgrowth of the human values, which is we talk a lot about the personal data that we have stored with internet services like Facebook, like Twitter, like Amazon and Google and Apple, right? And there are many questions having to do with whether these companies are doing the right things with our data. But the question is there some value that we can obtain from all this data that we're creating that we're not unlocking today? And so that part of the journey is going to be more of a question. I'm not going to talk about something I know anything about, but it's a question for us to think about as we continue developing technology. So what is integrity? Integrity is bad stuff happening on social networks, okay? The ones that get the most attention is hate speech being propagated by, or being posted, misinformation, which is, drink this thing and you will never get COVID again. But there are all these many other forms that you can see on this list that are not very nice things, okay? Now, the vast majority of content on social networks, and I'm talking, 95% and above, but don't quote me on the number, is good stuff. It's people who want to connect, people who share good information, good experiences, and people showing pictures of their food. Okay, so even though there's a lot of attention on the misuse of social media for things like on this list, these things get a lot of obviously they get a lot of attention. The vast majority of the content is good. Okay, so I want to keep that in mind. I also want to keep in mind that not all cases where people post bad stuff like hate speech is done on purpose. Sometimes people just don't know what is a respectful way to communicate, and when they are told that this is not right, they don't do it again. Okay, but there are actors out there who will try to trick the system no matter what we do. So the way we think about this problem of integrity is we have these things called community policies, okay? And if you want, you can go to the Facebook community policies. This is what you have here, but Twitter has their own, YouTube has their own, and any company that allows people to create content will have community policies. These things tell you what you may and may not do. Okay, the point about these policies is a few things. One is they're extremely hard to formulate because they're very subtle and they need to cover nuances in many cultures, in many geographies. Okay, so these are hard. But the issues themselves are very, very hard. So for example, you cannot tell people to go and bomb other people. Okay, thank God. Okay, but it is okay to explain in the context of a chemistry lesson how to create a bomb. Okay, you're allowed to teach people how to create bombs. Another example is you're not allowed to sell firearms or drugs on say Facebook. Okay, but you're allowed to debate whether the laws for gun control are good or not. Okay, so these are very subtle even for humans to distinguish. But imagine a computer program that has to do this at scale all the time. So these things are extremely subtle, and these policies are also constantly changing as things are happening. Policies are added, policies are retracted. COVID brought on a bunch of new policies. So it's a very active area all the time. Now, in case you imagine that this problem can be solved with a bunch of people and a bunch of rules that you set in place, that can't happen. The amount of content that is being posted to social media is huge in at least 100, 200 different languages with cultural nuances, and it's just impossible to do manually. You just can't have somebody looking at every post and deciding whether it violates one of 50 types of violations. So the point here is that artificial intelligence is not a nice to have, it is a must have. You cannot address this problem without AI. Another point to keep in mind is that in doing so, we're making very hard decisions, right? It's very easy to preserve integrity by saying, we'll just have a classifier that if it sees any hint of bad stuff, it's going to remove the content. but that's going to prevent people from actually expressing their opinions and having free speech and connecting with others. So there's a very tight balance that you need to keep here. So let's skip here. So the general process by which this is done is when something gets posted or an account gets created. Some accounts are invalid accounts, and people try to catch them. The content, these events, are piped into an AI system that looks at the content of the post or the account and other context around it, and tries to determine whether it violates one of these policies. Okay, if it's extremely confident above a certain threshold and it says that it violates, it gets usually removed right away. Okay, if the classifier is not as confident in its prediction, it will send that content to a large pool of humans that will look at the content and will go through a workflow to decide whether it is a violation or not. Now, I want to point out that misinformation is different. Okay, so for hate speech, for example, Facebook will employ a bunch of people that will determine whether something is hate speech when there is a doubt. Misinformation is different because Facebook or any other social network doesn't want to be in the position of deciding what is true and what is not true in the world. We are not doctors, we are not lawyers, we're not politicians. We should not be deciding what is true in the world, and therefore these misinformation goes actually to third parties that are specialized in the particular domain that this misinformation is supposed to be about, whether it's medical or political or something like that. Violations, so enforcing the violation would be removing the content, down-ranking it quite a bit so people are unlikely to see it. But in some cases, you have to bring in law enforcement. So for example, if we can detect that somebody is actually threatening to commit suicide, we will call the local police and try to help them. Okay, so these things get treated in different ways. Okay, so I just want to point out that it's not actually clear what it means to enforce integrity, right? So one solution is remove the post. It's no good, it's hate speech, remove it. Another possibility would be, well, let's just downrank it, right? So when you come onto Facebook or Twitter, there are thousands of posts that you can't see, right? If it's if the system decides that this is not going to be among the top, you're probably not going to see it, you're probably not going to forward it, and so the damage that it can do is going to be minimized. Another question is, well, you know, people have different tolerance for different kinds of violation, right? So maybe the system should be developing models that are personalized and do something depending on what your sensitivity is, which is of course very hard to detect. How this plays out is actually not yet a solved problem. Now, I just want to. There's the AI technology that has been developed in the last few years in order to create these classifiers that detect violations are really a tour de force of AI. Not only that, the AI, this problem has pushed AI to new to places where it has not been before, which is a good thing. And you can find out Facebook and a bunch of other networks actually publish every 6 or 3 months reports about how well the classifiers do, and so it's completely transparent. I just want to point out 2 things that have happened in the last 2 years that have been incredibly important for the development of integrity enforcing technology. One is recent advances in natural language processing, and in particular, the ability to translate between languages. So the problem that you see here is there are languages, you know, if you're trying to develop a classifier for hate speech in English, that's relatively easy because there's plenty of text on the web. There are plenty of posts. There's a lot of data in English. So your classifier has a lot of data to work with, and it's going to be, you know, pretty good. If you're trying to do the same thing in Burmese, you don't have that much data. So there are a lot of languages that are not used as frequently on the web as English or I don't know about Swedish, but you know, German and Spanish and whatever, right? And so your classifiers aren't going to be that strong. The techniques that enable systems to actually take a sentence and translated into some independent representation, a representation independent of the language, have enabled us to, like Burmese as an example, to actually develop much better classifiers in low resource languages. The other piece of advance I want to point out is in computer vision. This was already mentioned in the medical panel in the morning. One of these images is broccoli, and one of these images is marijuana, okay? I would do a poll among the audience to say which is which. When I ask my 17-year-old son which one is broccoli and which one is marijuana, he says it doesn't matter, you should ban both of them. He hates broccoli, okay? And I've given this talk multiple times, and I actually don't remember which is which. But the point is that the machine is better than humans when it comes to some of these detections. Another big challenge that is not solved is multimodal. So what you're seeing here is an example where you have an image of a cemetery. There's nothing wrong with that. And there's text that says that everybody in your ethnic group belongs here. There's nothing wrong with that. It's that putting those two together which makes this a hateful meme. Okay? And how do you understand? And so for us, it takes additional processing, right? But for a computer program, this is going to be exceptionally hard. So this is, again, a lot of advances were made in this area, but this remains a challenging area. Okay, so as I said, AI has integrity has pushed AI into new heights. And you know, we've made a lot of progress, but the problem is not solved. An interesting question to ask is what's going to happen in the metaverse? Okay, you can ask also what is the metaverse, but we're going to skip that question right now. But the point is that in the metaverse, your interactions are going to be much more real time. So it's not like you're posting and there's going to be a post that is going to be seen by 1 million people. That, you know, you can develop AI to remove that post. Here, you're going to be sitting in a room and somebody's going to, you know, say something to you that might cause you a very bad experience. And at that point, the damage is done. There's no, you know, the same model doesn't work. A possible solution is, you know, there are going to be worlds in the metaverse, and maybe you give the governance to the creators of the world. So there are going to be worlds where you need to behave well, and there are worlds where you can do whatever the heck you want. Okay, but this is still the point here is, at least at Meta, we're starting to think about these issues early on, whereas with integrity we were sort of catching up after the fact. But you know, what's going to happen here is yet to be done. Okay, so we get the human values. Okay, and if you think about the things that we're trying to balance when we talk about integrity are safety of our users, free expression, your ability to control your feed, but on the other hand, we don't want you to get into bubbles and not, you know, see things with perspective. So what we're doing is we're essentially balancing certain human values against each other. And so there's been a lot of excitement in the field of AI that we should be thinking about what are the human values that systems, recommendation systems that give you, you know, content. It can be Spotify, it can be Amazon, it can be Twitter, it can be TikTok. All of the systems are recommendation systems, and the way they rank the content is essentially expressing a certain set of human values. Okay, it's not that they don't, you can't avoid the problem here. There are human values in what you're doing. You need to understand them, and you need to figure out whether you're happy with the values that are being implicitly implemented by your system. There are these two books on the left that if you want to read more about this, and if you actually want to have a good time, read the book on the right, which I see as a beautiful example of where human values and AI has embodied the right human values. So there's been a lot of discussion, but to be very honest, it was kind of fluffy. It's easier to throw around the word human values and not really know what you're talking about. And so about a year ago, a bunch of us got together and said, let's do a study where we figure out what are the human values that are relevant to recommendation systems that these companies should pay attention to. What do these mean, and what is being done about them today? And the first thing we did was we actually were very humble. Okay, so in addition to AI people in the room, which we were the minority, we also had people from human-computer interaction and social science and psychology and policy and law and journalism. And the point is, this is not an AI problem. This is a societal problem, and we need to bring, this is the one big lesson to learn from this, you got to have a lot of people in the room when you discuss these issues, because those are the perspectives that you need, okay? And so the discussion was beyond fascinating. And the answer was, we were trying to get to 42, we couldn't. I'm not going to go through these values because I'm out of time. But the point is that clicking through here. The point is that what makes human values hard is the trade-offs. You're trading between privacy that you give people and the usefulness of the system. You're trading between giving them short-term value and long-term value. Are you going to watch the cat video, or are you going to watch the neural network tutorial, right? Free expression versus safety, well-being versus control. And so these things are, you got to remember these things are trade-offs, and who makes these decisions, right? So these are hard problems, and I mean, there's been a lot of work on this, but I think we're just beginning our journey there. I'm skipping a bunch here. Let me get to the last point, our digital data. And this is also an outgrowth out of the human values effort, right? We can have all these companies aligned with human values, and it would be great. Okay, Facebook can do the best job in the world aligning with human values, but I spend a tiny fraction of my time on Facebook. So even if you align my 5% of the day that I spend on Facebook with human values, I still have 95% of my day, and maybe it's pretty shitty. Okay, so the point is that our data, our interactions are siloed in many places, and the question I want to ask is, what would happen? I'm not talking about a product of any company right now. I'm trying to ask a question, which is, what if we could take all of our digital data, our photos, our map tracks that we have with Google Maps, our purchases, our Spotify tracks, all the data that we create just by interacting with all these services, and we can build a repository that is private and secure. In other words, it's available only to us, but it has a holistic view of us as individuals. And the hypothesis is that if we had this holistic view of the individual, we can actually build a completely new generation of apps that will provide us, each and every one of us, much more value than what we have today. What are the mechanisms that we need in order to make this vision possible? And this is an interesting discussion that we can have. And I will end with this. Here, a coffee picture to stimulate some discussion. Thank you.
Thank you. There are lots of questions here. So would you mind coming so you're in the picture? One question is, how do we embed integrity in the product design process? I thought that was a really clever question.
It is. There are many ways that you can.
Would you mind stepping?
Sure. So there are different ways in which we can do this, right? One is we remove certain pieces of data, right? So by the fact that we remove it, you're not going to see it, and it's not going to cause any harm. We can make it harder to share certain pieces of data. Okay, so one of the problems with one of the benefits of social network is that it's very easy to share information. But if you're unsure whether this information is true or not, you can put a label and say, hey, we're not sure this information is correct, so maybe you want to be careful when you press that share button. Or maybe we want to even disable the share button for a while until we verify, or a third party verifies that it's true. So there are certain things in controlling the virality of information that we can do in order to protect people. But again, it's a tough decision, because by putting those controls in, you're also limiting the ability to possibly share important information that is crucial to people.
How much do you sit down with Meta's head of product and discuss the design, the future design, and launches of new functionality in respect to integrity and safety?
So we have a cross-functional collaboration. So these are We have people in the room from policy that determine what what the community policies are. We have product people. We have engineers who are building the systems. We have AI people who are building models that are being used in these systems. We have people who look at the data that we use in order to build those models. So, for example, there is a limit on how long you can use certain data for building models for anything
Then it's erased.
and then it's erased. Yeah. So there. So if you're using data for various features, there are retention limits, and for integrity as well. So all of these voices are constantly being heard in the room, and that when we decide on a goal for the next 3 or 6 months, all of these people need to sign up to the same goal.
And here's a question about how you work. Enforcing integrity is not going to work post hoc anymore. How are you trying to predict and prepare for adverse issues in advance? For example, new technologies like metaverse, where how much are you working with sort of predictive models here?
Yeah. So there are certain. This is an active area of discussion, okay, and so I don't have a great answer for this yet.
Tell us how we can think about it.
Well, so we can think about it as we can take what we know today about integrity on the on Facebook itself and try to imagine what these things can look like in the metaverse. Okay, so that means we can already try to mitigate a lot of the harms, some fraction of the harms that might happen. Okay, so it's a mindset. It's a mindset that we know. Okay, these are the things that people try to do on Facebook, or it's not just Facebook. It's on Messenger itself, right? So messaging, actually, I should have said this. Messaging is another way of creating a bunch of violations, right? So people try to get kids to sign up to stuff and stuff like that, right? So we know what kind of violations are common and some of the things that
and what that user behavior looks like.
Yeah, so we know what it looks like on the products that people are using today heavily. So we at least can now try to imagine what that would look like in the metaverse.
Here's another question. Have you evaluated the possibility of letting the user select between different security algorithms or thresholds for their own feed?
So there are controls. There are a lot of controls that you can do, I think, on any social network, right? You can decide that you don't want to see certain things or things from certain people or certain topics, right? So you can do that. But what is harder is to understand your tolerance or for certain kinds of content, right? Depending on your background, depending on your cultural, your culture, right, and who you are. Some things might not be so bad for you, or might be extremely harmful for you. Now, those things are hard to predict, and we're not even. We're very careful not to try to predict extremely personal things on Facebook. We can't even try to predict your race, okay, which for good reasons. And so these things, it's a balance. It's a balance between privacy, your privacy, and the service that we give you, right? If we're not trying to infer things about you, we're supporting your privacy, but then we might be missing opportunities to protect you or to give you content that is useful to you.
Final question. If someone wants to start research on this topic, what is your advice for how you would get the data?
That's hard. So first of all, I thought you were going to ask where to read. There's a big, by the way, so there's a long survey that a bunch of us wrote about AI and its use in integrity, and so I would recommend reading that as to see what the state of the art was at least 2 years ago. The data is a hard problem, right? So, and that's one of the points that we point out in the paper, which is we can't just give user data to anyone to do research on. What we have done, for example, the hateful memes data set, is where we worked very carefully to create a data set that has memes that Some of them are hateful and some of them aren't. But the challenge there was we couldn't use photos or images from the real content. So what we did was we took a meme and we replaced the image with an image from a database of images that we're allowed to use, but we replaced it with an image that is conveys the same thing. Okay, and so so we have made
And that's
others.
accessible
That
if
is
I'm a
acceptable.
researcher?
Yeah. So it's called the hateful memes data set. And there are a bunch of others. So it's a very, very hard problem to create data that is valuable for research but doesn't give away private user data.
I think your job sounds really interesting, but I'm not sure I would like to have it. It's a very complex challenge, and because you have a very complex product that has a large part of people's lives in the digital society. But we're very happy that you came here and you raised all these issues and you made us think. Thank you so much.
Thank you for having me.